Temperatures well below average for the time of year, feeling bitterly cold indeed. Sticking with more showers as we go through into this evening across the northern half of Scotland, we're going to continue to see those snow totals building up 30-40 centimetres perhaps over the highest routes. Some difficult driving conditions as well, because ice will be a problem not only across northern Scotland, also across parts of Northern Ireland too. Drier for southern Scotland, much of England and Wales, just those western and eastern fringes still seeing a few showers. And where we get those showers, even if you haven't seen much snow, we could see some wet surfaces, so some icy patches a problem as well as we go through into tomorrow morning. Drier areas having a lot of clear skies through the night. As a result, temperatures plummeting. We're going to see many places falling several degrees below freezing. A harsh frost for most of us through Sunday morning. A very cold start to the day indeed. But again, it is going to be another bright, often sunny start for most places. Worth noting the winds change direction ever so slightly, still generally coming from that cold northerly direction, but they back just a little bit. As a result, we're going to see fewer showers down the eastern side of the country as we go through tomorrow compared to today, and a few more feeding a bit further inland across parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, and some of them could be wintry. Again, temperatures on the low side, feeling crisp but cold.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
From the Aurora Collection Resort here in Lapland. We're on an amazing Arctic adventure to celebrate our greatest cash giveaway, a simply stunning £85,000. And in 2026, we're giving you the chance to win it all.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 9th of February 2026. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
I think it's just good, honest, humble food. And yeah, as people get away from the ultra-processed stuff and get back to their roots, and what's better than a good jacket potato?
Do you know what? Sales of jacket spuds have gone through the roof. The big potatoes at Waitrose. There's been a 178% increase in people looking at recipes. And I just think it's wholesome, it's affordable, it's comfortable, it makes you feel good, it's back to basics. That, I think, at the moment, sums up the nation.
I think very much it being affordable as well. With the climate we're living in at the moment, it definitely helps knowing, you're putting food on the table for a reasonable price, and people appreciate that. And it's good, honest food. You can feed your kids, and kids are seeing it on social media, and they're getting excited about it as well. So they're not like, obviously everyone sees all the big brands, and now there's all these, jacket potato people out there, and we're giving them something that's healthy, and they want to eat it. And I think the parents appreciate that.
And Ben, I've seen your videos. They queue around the block to get to you. If people are in the mood to cook a potato tonight, of course, we don't want to affect your sales. What is your sort of top of the pops spud recipe? Give it to us.
Oh, it's all about variety. It's picking the right potato is really important. Get a nice melody or a cara or culture or something like that. Nice and big. In the oven, if you can. Hour and 20. Get a nice crispy skin on there. Loads of butter, loads of cheese, and a nice curry on top or something. That's my go-to.
Ooh. Now that was a final little curveball there you threw at the last minute there, Ben.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 10 a.m. on Saturday, the 3rd of January, live across the United Kingdom. This is Saturday Morning Live.
Breaking news this morning, Venezuela has declared a state of national emergency after President Donald Trump confirmed that the US has carried out large-scale strikes on the capital of Caracas.
Now, President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country by the US Army's Delta Force. And Donald Trump will hold a press conference later this afternoon. We'll keep you updated on developments throughout the morning.
And the latest from South America comes as Iran opens fire on anti-regime protesters. Despite President Trump's warning, Washington is locked and loaded and ready to intervene.
Now, in politics back home, child rapists will be jailed for life under Reform UK's plans to crack down on grooming gangs if they come to power at the next general election. We'll be discussing those proposals and much more at the start of this momentous election year.
The biggest stories, boldest opinions and liveliest debates over the next 2 hours. I'm Sophie Reaper.
And I'm Charlie Peters, and your weekend starts here. Well, it's an extraordinary morning of breaking news. The breaking news is up behind us on that screen, and I expect it'll be there for the next 2 hours because the information coming from Venezuela this morning, Sophie, is extraordinary. For Maduro to be captured by Delta Force, taken to we don't know where, potentially Guantanamo Bay, potentially Puerto Rico. We'll get more details.
That press conference later today, isn't it? 4 p.m. UK time. We'll be hearing a bit more from the USA about the capture of Maduro. We'll be bringing you all the latest here, of course, on Saturday Morning Live and throughout the rest of the day.
I'd love to hear what you think about this intervention. Is Trump right to do it? What does it mean for Great Britain? Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves of anywhere in the world. What does it mean for us here at home and indeed potentially for your paycheck at the end of the month? Could this change energy bills? Send your views, post your comments. You know the drill by now, gbnews.com/your say.
But before we do anything else, here's all your latest news headlines with the lovely Sophia Wensler.
Charlie, Sophie, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Your top story this hour. Now, as you've been hearing, Donald Trump has confirmed US strikes on Venezuela and claimed President Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country. Maduro declared a state of emergency after explosions and low-flying aircrafts were heard in the capital of Caracas this morning. The Venezuelan government said it rejects and denounces the US military's aggression. The Trump administration has accused President Maduro of heading a drug cartel and says it's cracking down on trafficking, which the president denies. Defense editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, says it's possibly the biggest development in the second Trump administration.
There has been continuous pressure now for months, for 2 or 3 months, from America, mainly on the excuse or justification that Venezuela is a drug hub, a major source of drugs. It isn't quite as big as made out. But the main contention seems to be about oil, about Venezuelan oil, which Trump has accused has been illegitimately obtained, again, from other people, including American interests.
Meanwhile, Iranian security forces have opened fire on protesters last night, despite Donald Trump's threat to intervene in the rapidly spreading unrest. So far, at least 10 people have been killed and dozens arrested after a severe economic crisis sparked violent protests across the country. The US president had warned Iran earlier in the day that Washington was locked and loaded and would rescue demonstrators if Tehran killed any more anti-regime protesters. But Iran's foreign ministry condemned what they called intimidating remarks and threatened a swift, decisive and comprehensive response if the US intervenes. Now, sparklers on champagne bottles are the likely cause of a deadly fire at a Swiss ski resort, according to officials. The blaze on New Year's Eve in Crans, Montana, injured 119 people and killed 40. Pictures of teenagers still unaccounted for have begun to emerge, with a student who studied in England declared missing. 15-year-old Charlotte Needham, who holds French and Israeli citizenship, briefly attended the JFS school in London and Emmanuel College in Hertfordshire. In other news, searches for a third person have resumed after 2 bodies were pulled from the sea off the coast of East Yorkshire coast. Police were called to Withensea at 3:15 p.m. yesterday, where a 67-year-old man was pulled unconscious from the water and died at the scene, while the second person's body was recovered on Friday evening. Police say circumstances surrounding both deaths are not believed to be suspicious. And Gen Z and millennial couples are choosing dogs rather than having children, according to analysis by the Times newspaper. For many young couples, getting a puppy used to be a test before having a baby, but now some 34% of postcode areas in England have more dogs than children. The current estimate of about 30 million dogs in the UK is up from a figure of 9 million in 2019. The number of children, though, is about 15 million, but yearly growth has remained largely flat. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Charlie and Sophie.
Thank you, Sophia, and welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with me and Charlie Peters.
Well, some breaking news for you this morning, of course, because President Donald Trump confirms that the United States has carried out large-scale strikes on Venezuela.
Indeed. President Trump has posted on Truth Social in the last half an hour saying that President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country.
Now, an ally of Venezuela, Iran, has commented this morning saying that the attack is a blatant violation of its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. We've also heard from Cuba denouncing this intervention from the United States. And in further breaking news just coming into us in the last few moments, the Venezuelan government has said that it does not know the whereabouts of President Maduro and his wife. That's come in from the vice president in an audio message sent to state TV.
And we're also just hearing in the last few seconds from the Spanish Foreign Ministry, Spain calling for the de-escalation and moderation and respect for international law in Venezuela.
And also that same vice president demanding proof of life for Maduro and his wife in that message to state TV. Well, let's bring in now the former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. Good morning, Mr. Ellwood. Thank you for joining us on Saturday Morning Live. This is an audacious operation from the US government, with reports now that Delta Force were involved in extracting Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Your reaction to this operation today?
Well, good morning. Yes, from an operational perspective, this was daring indeed, and successful from what we understand. Quite incredible start to 2026. It was a heavily orchestrated air attack across Caracas. Then we see that President Maduro has now been captured. Astonishing developments from what was actually a simmering situation. Small vessels being targeted, oil containers and so forth, and now this. I've been predicting for some time that attacks on the mainland were very likely, but I was not expecting this so soon. And we wait to see the reaction from the Venezuelan people, the international community, and from within the US. And in all three cases, it may work actually against Trump. I mean, bombing another country's capital, kidnapping its leader, can rally the nation to support that leader, even if he's as unpopular as Maduro. The US will be criticized for deploying its superior military power, a return to gunboat diplomacy, if you like, a proof of double standards. China and Russia, I'm sure, will argue one rule for one, another for the United States, reinforcing anti-US narratives about its imperial behavior. You know, does the military superiority now substitute for legitimacy? Is this where America is now going? And lastly, at home, his MAGA base, very much anti-interventionism, very much nationalist, supported Trump because he promised to end foreign interventions, not start them. So we need to learn more. We wait for what the White House will do next, but until we can fully appreciate the consequences of what just happened. But bigger picture, with everything else going on around the world, there's another alarm bell going off on the global order dashboard. It's going to be a very dangerous year indeed.
Now, you mentioned that the tensions have been simmering, of course, for several months. Things have been building up to this, perhaps. But, of course, this was all to do with the Trump administration's supposed clampdown on drugs and migration in Venezuela. But then why target these two key military bases? If it's all to do with drugs and migration, why target those bases?
Well, it all goes down to the fact that Trump blames Maduro himself as the president for encouraging this to happen, to make it continue. Now, if your objective is to then remove Maduro, to hopefully then have a regime change by taking the president away, then you have to go in and eliminate any of the air defense systems that might prevent that Delta force that you spoke of earlier of getting into where they needed to go. This was an audacious operation. There's no doubt about it. High risk indeed. We don't know whether there were any injuries or any fatalities on the American side. But from what we know at the moment, it was successful in the sense that the president has been removed. But where this goes next, it opens up a Pandora's box of problems. It's breached international laws right across the board. I'm sure there'll be an emergency UN Security Council meeting with Russia and China saying, is this what America now does? And then big questions for allies too, including Britain, because much as we support America's push against the drug trade, push against Venezuela, promoting its use of illegal oil against sanctions, can we support America at this moment in time? So I'm sure there'll be some frantic discussions going on behind the scenes between international capital cities as we speak right now.
And Tobias Elwood, speaking about Nicolas Maduro propping up this narco state, as it's termed by the US government, a terrorist state. We hear some language from US government officials as part of this build-up and potentially justification for their intervention. We have now had further reaction from some of those international capitals you were referring to. The Russian Foreign Ministry has said that it's important to prevent further escalation and to focus on finding a way out of the situation through dialogue. And we've also heard from the same foreign ministry, the Kremlin, saying that Latin America must remain a zone of peace and that Venezuela must be guaranteed the right to determine its own destiny. Now, just before I come to you, Tobias Elwood, we've also heard from the US government's Deputy Secretary of State, of course, Christopher Landau, saying that Maduro will finally face justice for his crimes. It's interesting, potentially, isn't it, Tobias, that we've heard so much from America's enemies and its opponents on the global stage, but nothing really so far from any of its allies.
No, and you won't. As I say, I think the first step is to actually confirm the details. As we discuss now, we don't know exactly what happened. We're dealing with just the top level lines, and I think they would want some clarity, some assurance as to what actually happened before they make a public statement. I'd also suspect that Britain is speaking to its own allies, France, Germany, other countries as well, to say, how should we respond here? This is difficult. On the one side, America is our closest security ally. That's second to none. But ultimately, we have an American president that is doing things in its own style, in a very different way than any American president since the Second World War. And we now need to recognize that that's actually affecting global order. It's America's disengagement from America, choosing to advance its own interests on a unilateral level in this way. It's actually going to give space, I'm afraid, for our adversaries to actually present themselves as the more measured exemplar on the international stage. Big questions here. As I stress, a very bumpy start to 2026.
Tobias, of course, Venezuela is the largest proven oil reserves in the world, 303 billion barrels. The US, by comparison, holds about 55 billion barrels, placing it ninth globally on that hierarchy. To what extent would you assess that the oil disputes between the two countries, and indeed Venezuela's power and stature by virtue of its reserves, has played a role in this intervention and the deterioration between the two nations?
You know, I think you asked the fundamental question, because if you want to look at what a strategy is that Trump is pursuing, it's perhaps a dismissal of our global order the fact that America is now going to look after its own and look after its own interests in its own area. So Greenland is now part of its sphere of influence, as is Canada and as is Venezuela. Why is Venezuela important? Not just geographically, because as you point out, it's got the necessary oil reserves as the world gets ever more competitive from an energy perspective, from mineral wealth perspective, and so forth. And Trump has just dismissed our global order, allowing Russia, China, and indeed America, these sort of alpha males, to develop their own spheres of influence, separate from each other, but protecting their own. Venezuela, unfortunately, falls into that space near America, and therefore Trump feels that's quite right for him to then wander into.
Now, Tobias, we're currently seeing on our screens some really rather calm pictures from Caracas in Venezuela. And we've heard in the last few seconds, President Trump has told the New York Times a lot of good planning went into these strikes in the early hours in Caracas. What does this mean going forward? What are we going to see happen in the coming hours and days, do you think?
Well, the next few days will absolutely be critical. It would be wrong to make comparisons with the Cuban Missile Crisis, but we are in that unknown space where we are unaware of what China and Russia will do. Venezuela, the Maduro himself, has got very strong relationships with China, and certainly those big countries will not want to see America advance its influence into Latin America in this way. So diplomacy will now kick in. There's no doubt about that, unless there are further attacks by America, military attacks that actually take place. But ultimately, Caracas will respond itself. And I suspect, I'm afraid, we saw this in Yugoslavia with President Tito there as well. You know, when a president, however unpopular, is attacked in this way, in this case kidnapped, people actually rally around and say, well, he's our problem. You don't have a right to interfere in this way. So what America does next will be critical in listening to the international community. But the prospect of escalation here, I'm afraid we cannot ignore.
OK, Tobias Ellwood, thank you very much for your time this morning. And
thank you.
We can speak now to Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, we are now 7 minutes away from sunrise in Caracas, but as dawn approaches, I think everyone in that city will be awake after a night of heavy bombing. Are they waking up to a totally new Venezuela?
Well, I think a lot of people will hope that. I mean, the fundamental problem with Venezuela is that, going back to the Hugo Chavez era, is that the elections have really been, rigged in a way to keep these, extreme socialists in power, and the roots of what has happened in Venezuela overnight go back to the elections last year, where lots of people thought Maduro had fixed the result. And that's certainly something that Trump will use to justify his intervention. And so there will be a lot of people in Venezuela who've suffered horribly because of what's been going on politically in the country for two decades or more. So they'll breathe a sigh of relief. But as Tobias was saying, this is also a fundamental breach of Venezuelan sovereignty. And a lot of Venezuelans will be very unhappy at the fact that the Yankees have come in and kidnapped their president.
Con, shall we talk about a bit about what this means for us here in the United Kingdom? In the last few minutes alone, we've heard from the Spanish Foreign Ministry, we've heard from the German Foreign Ministry. I feel certain that Sir Keir Starmer and his team will be working on some kind of response as we speak. But what is that going to mean for the Labour Party? What's it going to mean for us here in the United Kingdom? Where do we go from here?
Hello?
Hello, Con. I think we might have lost the connection, having some trouble. Are you still hearing us now, Con? We're just asking how this operation by the US government could have impacted the United Kingdom and the British government. I think we've lost Con Coughlin, Sophie, but
we will do our best. Well, I do try.
It's a great question we need an answer to.
Indeed,
because
and I think we'll endeavour to get him back throughout the programme.
And we've not heard anything from the British government yet. That's a
Not
question
yet.
that really needs to be answered, because we are hearing now from Argentina. We've heard from Javier Milei, the president there. He's celebrated the capture of Nicolas Maduro, saying liberty advances. And also there's been an announcement from Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro. He's said on social media that his country's forces are being deployed to its border with Venezuela. He's announced that there would be additional support in place in the event of a massive influx of refugees. So if I just want to go back to something that Tobias Elwood was talking about, how might this play with his base in the United States for Donald Trump, talking about the MAGA world and how Trump has promised not to be an interventionist president. And while he's been on holiday in Florida, he's launched airstrikes in Syria, in Nigeria, and now this operation in Venezuela. I think it is worth noting, and this has been missed, I think, a bit this morning, which is that Venezuelans are a big voting bloc for Donald Trump. And of course, their experience under socialism, under Hugo Chavez, under Maduro and his ilk, has very much made them some of Trump's most fervent supporters. And Venezuelans overseas around the world, just from checking social media profiles of some of the more prominent commentators and activists, they are in absolute delight this morning. That is a key constituency for Donald Trump.
And also just on European response, we have literally just heard from Italy's foreign minister. They say we are monitoring the situation in Venezuela with particular attention to the Italian community. And the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, is being constantly informed with updates on exactly what's taking place there. So on the European and on what's happening here, we can bring Con back in now, I believe. Con, just to go back to the question I asked you before we lost you there, what kind of impact is this going to have in the United Kingdom, and what will Sir Keir Starmer be doing right now in terms of a response?
Sorry, I think we've lost you there, Con. Our connection's not quite working there, but we'll try and bring him back later. It's a key question because we need to know how the UK government will react to this. There are British forces in South America, of course, in the Falkland Islands. There is a significant deployment of assets there. Much of the British military's deployment to South America, of course, we wouldn't be able to bring in. Right, third time lucky. Let's try and bring in Con Coughlin now. Con, how will the UK government be reacting? What will the British government be doing right now?
Sorry for the technical hitches. Well, I mean, they will clearly have to give a response. But I think Sir Keir Starmer, because of this so-called special relationship that we have with the US, will want to have a very measured response. I don't think he's going to come out and condemn it. And we'll probably get some mealy-mouthed words about show restraint and all the rest of it. But I mean, I think the other thing I would say is that there's a wider context to this. I mean, Venezuela is an ally of Russia, for example, and we're in the midst of Ukrainian peace negotiations. And this, Putin will not like what's going on in Caracas today, and this sends a message to Putin and others that the Americans are prepared to act if you push them too far.
Now, Con, you mentioned the response from Russia this morning. They've, in fact, said, the foreign ministry in Russia say, we reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people and our support for its leadership's policy of defending the country's national interests and sovereignty. Now, hearing that from Russia, given the current geopolitical tensions between themselves and other countries, particularly Ukraine, but the United Kingdom, the USA, what will that mean that Russia have made those comments this morning?
Well, I don't think they had any alternative. But, I mean, the reality is, and we saw this when the US struck Iran last summer, is that there's very little the Russians can do. They can jump up and down and say Venezuela's, a very, very important ally of ours, but they really just send, air defences and other weaponry to Venezuela, particularly after the president's been deposed. So, it does put the Russians in a difficult position. Yet another of Moscow's allies are in trouble. I mean, we've seen what's happened to Iran, which is supposed to be very close to Moscow. The Russians did nothing when the Israelis and Americans attacked last summer. I don't think they can do much now. But I mean, I think the bigger concern, though, is that President Trump, who came to office saying he doesn't like military interventions overseas, it's not in America's interests, has shown himself to be rather trigger happy in recent weeks. We've had, military action against Islamic State in Nigeria and elsewhere, and in Syria, and now we've got this attack on Venezuela. So, the challenge, I suppose, for the Western alliance is to make sure that Trump doesn't go completely out of control in terms of future military actions.
Colin Coughlin, stay with us, please, because some of the strikes that we saw overnight, targeting, of course, key logistical and military locations. Dawn is now breaking over Caracas. It's an eerie calm over that city now. But when there were explosions rocking the area just a few hours ago, one of the reports is that the US military had struck the Hugo Chavez mausoleum in the Venezuelan capital. It was once a military museum converted into Chavez's mausoleum after his death. That adds a sort of symbolic dimension to these strikes, does it not? Going beyond targeting purely military and logistical locations. And of course, we're waiting for that to be verified, but lots of credible reports that had been struck in the earlier hours of this morning. What is your reaction to those reports?
Well, I mean, it's quite a gesture by the past the Americans. I mean, the fundamental issue here is that Venezuela has a very hard left government that pursues hard left socialist policies, which are completely the opposite of how Trump wants to see the world run. And so they've been on a collision course for some years. So, I mean, Trump is saying this is all about drug smuggling and all the rest of it, but this is basically an ideological war between, an ultra-capitalist like Donald Trump and ultra-socialists such as the Chavez regime in Venezuela. And of course, Maduro was very much Chavez's appointed heir.
And Con, we're seeing now quite a lot of reaction from British left-wing political figures. Jeremy Corbyn has spoken out against this intervention. Zara Sultana from your party, so both those parties' representatives speaking out against this, referring to it as imperialism. We can expect much of this, can't we, from the British and potentially also the European left and far left. It could put, when you said that Keir Starmer's statement is likely to be sort of non-committal, a sort of vague language about restraint. But actually, is there not a chance that we could see the British government coming out in full support of the deposition of an autocratic dictator who lost an election but clung on illegally?
Yeah. Well, this, as I said, this is politically very delicate for Starmer. And, the hard left, people like Ken Livingstone, Jeremy Corbyn and all the rest of it have held both Chavez and Maduro up as paragons of socialism. And irrespective of the appalling damage they've inflicted on the Venezuelan economy in recent years, as I said, there'll be a lot of people in Venezuela who'd be glad to see the back of them and be hoping that basic things like living standards will improve without this sort of socialist dictatorship. But it does put Starmer in a difficult position, which is why I imagine that they are trying to come up with some very neutral statement. I might be wrong. He might come out and completely condemn it. But if he does that, then he risks breaking a very important relationship with the Trump administration, which is already facing difficulties because Trump doesn't like Starmer's woke policies such as net zero and all the rest of it.
Con Coughlin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really interesting to get your take. Joining us now in the studio for some further reaction is former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and broadcaster Duncan Barks. Matthew, just come to yourself first to get some reaction on that left-wing reaction this morning. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it puts people on the left in a difficult position, people on the sort of sensible left, people on the far left, like Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultan, who you've been saying, Owen Jones, I'm sure, is out there tweeting, will be condemning it roundly. I mean, it's not that long ago that Ken Livingstone was taking Venezuelan oil, Venezuelan oil for buses, basically, petrol for buses, and just claiming that the saving was used to give low-income Londoners cheaper bus fares. So, I mean, they were real allies of the regime in Venezuela. But for the government and for the sort of sensible people on the left, it's a bit of a dilemma, because clearly there are huge questions about the legality of what's been going on, huge questions about the sense of what's been going on, both in terms of what happens in Venezuela, but also the precedent in terms of the moral high ground lost in Russia and over Ukraine. But on the other hand, it's getting rid of a nasty regime. So it will be quite interesting to see what the Prime Minister says. I suspect they will come out in support, but do a bit of the toning things down statement we've heard from elsewhere in Europe.
Well, Duncan, you've heard that from Matthew on sort of we can just expect the far left to come out and trot out its defence of Venezuela, regardless of the situation. But I want to bring you what Zara Sultana has said, because in her first sentence, I think she's on the money. Cool. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, and that's no coincidence. True. That is a key part of the American interest in this country. That is clearly a part of the strategic agenda here. They can wrap it up in language about the narco state, about small boats of drugs. They can go on about deposing a dictator, but that's a key part of the equation as well.
Massively, and the ripple effects of this are going to be fascinating, because Cuba, for example, whose economy is literally in the doldrums at the moment, relies really heavily on Venezuelan oil. That pipeline, for want of a better phrase, is going to be cut off now, I suspect, and consequently, that's going to have a massive impact on Cuba, which is already suffering as a result of US sanctions. So, I mean, the ripple effects of what we've seen and heard over the last couple of hours are genuinely going to be vast. I mean, we have some unanswered questions. We've got the Trump press conference, I believe, is going to be 4 o'clock this afternoon, UK time. We need to find out if he had congressional authority. We don't know the answer to that. We also need to find out where Maduro is and if he's unharmed. We need the answers to those questions as well. That's really, really important. And of course, we're waiting to see what Keir Starmer says, but you're absolutely right. I think it'll be a very carefully constructed statement, just sort of like balancing on that tightrope where something is said when nothing really is being said.
Well, on that, on Maduro, we're just hearing breaking lines in the last few seconds. The US Senator says Marco Rubio told that the Maduro arrest to stand trial on criminal charges in the US, and that there's going to be no further action now that he's in US custody. What do you make of that, Matthew?
Yeah, this is quite bizarre, because it all seems to be in Donald Trump's imagination that Maduro, whatever his other sins, is sort of personally trafficking drugs. I can't quite see what charges he's going to go on. And of course, he may well be acquitted in a US court. I mean, the US judicial independence is asserted all the time, including we've seen what happened to Trump himself. So that seems to me a very high-risk strategy if it's all about putting Maduro on charges in the US rather than taking action on the international stage.
Actually, he's got a $50 million bounty on his head, an outstanding US grand jury indictment for drug trafficking, an ongoing investigation by the International Criminal Court for possible crimes against humanity. Maduro does not want to be going up to a US court. No.
I think he wants to less go to the ICC court, because I think the wider political point about crimes against humanity, about being answerable for what the regime has done, I think to me seems the strongest charges against him rather than just specifically the drugs.
And Duncan, now that we've heard that from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, that they don't want to take any further action, the US has, in a sense, completed this operation, this lightning raid. They've grabbed Maduro and his wife, gotten out of the country. It does suggest that significant work has been conducted by the US government, including the CIA, of course, to lay the groundwork to prevent any escalation without their involvement after they're gone, that perhaps they've been working with those opposition figures to shore up an alternative as soon as he's gone.
Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, we can all think of countless examples around the world where there's not been a proper exit plan thought about and chaos has resulted. It's about the people now of Venezuela. You've got the Defence Secretary who's urging the people to take to the streets and protest and rise up against what's happened. If they're going to be foreign troops on the ground in Venezuela, it suggests so far this morning that that's not going to be the case. But there will be a vacuum there. How is it going to be filled is the question. There are various players who potentially could fill it, and I suspect you're right. You do not launch an operation of this scale without thinking what happens next.
And there will be some hardliners inside Venezuela, Matthew, who will be plotting. Well, I think the time of plotting is over now. They'll be seeking to urgently react. But having seen what they've seen tonight, they must know there's no chance on earth that they could ever have an opportunity to take power again.
Well, the problem is if there aren't US troops on the ground, they could have a chance to take power again because...
just around the corner, 4,500 Marines.
Absolutely. But, I mean, there is a backlash. Even moderate Venezuelans who don't like Maduro don't particularly want the US president determining who runs their country by direct military intervention. So I'm not sure the US is going to get it all its own way, even if it's always going to have that superior firepower.
You're right to make that point. The psychology of this, the human psychology stuff, should not be underrated, because ultimately you might hate Maduro, but you would hate more the idea that a foreign president is coming along and telling you who's going to run your country next, and effectively has come into your country, broken into your country, and nicked your president. So despite your feelings about Maduro, what you will end up seeing, a lot of people just go, I don't like him, but I don't like this either.
Absolutely.
Shall we take a bit of time to reflect on what this means exactly for the Venezuelan people? Because in Caracas alone, there's a population of around 3 million people. They've gone to bed and they've woken up this morning. We were seeing live shots of Caracas earlier. They've been awoken in the night to bombing in their city, in their country, and to have their president captured by the US. What exactly does this mean for the Venezuelan people? I mean, you're right in saying that, they psychologically, they may feel, particularly aggrieved that their president has been captured by another country. But what does this mean for them? At the end of the day, if there's bombing taking place and there's going to be soldiers on the ground, it's not great for their people, putting it mildly.
No, absolutely. I think there is a real risk of civil war in Venezuela because the country is split. Although over several elections they've been rigged in favour of the regime, Maduro and his party, that doesn't mean there's no support for him. There is still significant support for the Maduro regime and for the Bolivarian, as they call it, system, and you can expect those people to be pretty angry, as well as those people, as Duncan was saying, who are in the middle ground. So, I mean, you could see, if there were no US troops to regulate it, you could just see chaos, and that, I think, was danger for everybody, including actually for the US.
Duncan, could you clarify earlier when we were speaking about Marco Rubio? He was actually been quoted by Utah Senator Mike Lee, who earlier this morning raised concerns about the strike, saying, I look forward to learning what, if anything, might constitutionally justify this action. Well, he later posted on X, this action likely falls within the president's inherent authority to protect US personnel from actual or imminent attack. And he also said that Maduro would be standing trial on criminal charges in the United States. He's reporting that from Marco Rubio, should stress that. Okay. I just want to bring you an update from the New York Times, who phoned President Donald Trump in the moments after he made that announcement on Truth Social. The New York Times reporter there, Tyler Pager, saying that the Trump sounded tired, but he said a lot of planning, a lot of great troops and great people. So it was a brilliant operation that went on. The call lasted 50 seconds, and you're going to hear all about the plans and what comes next at 11 o'clock. It's rather a long time to wait after so dramatic an intervention.
It is. I mean, if you're a geopolitical nerd and you were looking at that part of the world, you would have seen that over the last several weeks in the Caribbean, the US naval fleet has been slowly building and building and building and building. We kind of we go, oh, that's quite interesting. I wonder what's happening there. And now we know. You're right. It's a long time to wait until 4 o'clock this afternoon to find out exactly whether or not there was congressional authority, who knew what was sanctioned, etc., and what happens next. In the meantime, though, you have that massive gap where you're going to have people in Venezuela who woken up this morning thinking, what the heck has happened to my country? You're going to have people on the streets. You're going to have people supporting Maduro and saying this should never have happened. You're also going to have a massive vacuum filled by people who actually think there's an opportunity here to swipe power from various political persuasions. The key thing here, if you're the White House, if you're Donald Trump, you move forward that press conference in terms of time, don't you? Because you want to control the narrative as early as possible. So, I mean, as you said, it's 11 o'clock this morning, 4 p.m. UK time, 11 o'clock US time. We'll just have to wait and see whether they've got any sense they'd actually bring that forward to stop speculation and to actually just close down this vacuum that could be filled by, to be blunt, some pretty unpleasant people.
Duncan Barks, Matthew Laza, thank you for joining us. We'll catch up with you later on in the programme. But we're joined now by politics reporter at Politics Home, Tom Scottson. Let's just talk about the United Kingdom, first of all, if you don't mind. We've heard so far from the Germans, from the Spanish. We're hearing that Giorgia Meloni of Italy is monitoring the situation closely. We've heard in the last few minutes from the Belgian Foreign Minister. We're yet to hear from Sir Keir Starmer or his team. How long do you think it will be before we get anything about the United Kingdom's response?
Well, we should definitely hear within the next few hours, I would presume. I mean, again, there's still very little that has been published yet, as you said. But I think the difficulty is for Keir Starmer is that he's cultivated quite a strong relationship with President Trump. I'd say that is probably one of his greatest achievements in office over the last 18 months. So he's going to find it very difficult now because probably his instincts are potentially against such an intervention, which is quite, an extreme case, and particularly Donald Trump coming into office, you wouldn't have expected him to be as this interventionist. But I think it'll probably straddle the line of saying that, obviously, of course, the Venezuelan regime is incredibly corrupt and something that the UK does not align with, while also treading a very careful line of saying that perhaps, like he's done in other European wars, and particularly in the Middle East, that should call for calm in the region.
And this press conference from President Donald Trump coming at 4 p.m. our time, Tom Scottson. Between now and then, a lot of world leaders are going to have their say, but it is particularly tricky for the United Kingdom because of our close relationship with Washington, but also because of how intensive our capabilities are focused on South America. We know that the British military has supported the US Navy and its wider assets in tackling drug smuggling in the region. That relationship has been strained recently by the lethal targeting on dozens of boats by the US military. Unlike a lot of the countries commenting on these developments this morning, Britain's really engaged with the US in this region. Its input matters.
It does. I think you're incredibly right. But I'd say that one of the big legacies of the 21st century has been the hangover from Iraq and Afghanistan and foreign intervention. And I feel that it's not lost on a lot of people within politics, not only just people in government, but MPs, that intervening within different countries, whether it be in the Middle East or as now South America, is that this can create huge ripple effects and those unintended consequences. And I feel that people in government will be very wary of creating something very similar to this. So I feel that hence probably why there's been such a delayed response in this. But as you said, yeah, there's huge at stake here in South America, and particularly with our relationship with Washington on this.
And we're also hearing now, Tom, that some Chinese oil tankers heading to Venezuela, they've diverted to Nigeria, and that several other tankers that were on their way, sanctioned by the United States, are now stationary. I think it's really important to focus on the fact that Venezuela is has the world's largest proven oil reserves. That's why this matters for everyone, really, because what happens next could impact the cost of our heating by the end of next week, really.
Massively. As we said, the energy prices in the UK are far higher than the OECD average. Our relationship with China is incredibly important as well. That's something that Keir Starmer has tried to rectify for good or ill, according to many of his backbenchers. But again, this is incredibly important because at a time where the UK economy is struggling, we're just heating off a recession as we speak, that something like this in a region that, of course, we can't control, this could really affect the UK economy and potentially Labour's electoral prospects.
And what about Russia, Tom? We've heard this morning that they're throwing their weight behind Venezuela and supporting President Maduro. How is that going to impact the United Kingdom's response, given, as you mentioned, their new relationship burgeoning with President Trump?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to see how it could affect UK per se. The main link, obviously, I could say, of course, is Russia's war with Ukraine and potentially splintering that relationship with between Putin and Trump. So the main thing that could happen here is that this could really create a strained relationship even further between Putin and Trump, and therefore delay any potential ceasefire in Ukraine. So, of course, that could affect the UK with potentially military exports and, of course, defence exports. The UK has been a huge exporter to Ukraine during during its fight against Russia for the last 4 years now, or coming up to 4 years in March. So I guess that could affect the UK's defence reserves. But I guess that with the UK's relationship with Russia directly, it's difficult to see how this will worsen it, because I guess that particularly other than Ukraine, we are Russia's bête noire within Europe.
Tom, we're talking about energy prices. There is a more nefarious product of which the price could be affected quite significantly by this, and that is, of course, cocaine. Because the first Trump administration charged Maduro with narco-terrorism in 2020. The then US Attorney General Barr accused the Venezuelan regime of being plagued by criminality and corruption, a charge that I think very few international observers have disputed. In particular, its alleged links with the Colombian guerrilla groups, causing untold quantities of cocaine to enter and devastate American communities, in the words of that Attorney General. That's why they've been targeting those small boats allegedly carrying drugs on questionable legal grounds. That is the subject of great controversy in the United States and indeed for Washington's allies around the world, particularly countries like the United Kingdom that provide them with intelligence in the region, source of great controversy there. But this impact on the drug trade, on a state accused of propping up those cartels and those guerrilla groups, that will have an impact on organised criminal gangs further down the chain, including those, of course, that operate in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, you're completely right. I guess that prices are the best look for any market, and of course when supply is short and demand stays the same, then prices will rise. So we'll expect, particularly within the illegal trade, drugs like cocaine, as you said, that they will rise and spike heavily. I guess then the factors, especially with many drugs and cartels within the UK that are working within the illegal market, they will look elsewhere, perhaps maybe to the Middle East and other regions, to acquire more drugs. So I guess that it won't necessarily stop the drug trade per se. I think it'll just move criminal gangs into different areas, particularly those that they can get supply and keep the price, particularly of illegal drugs, very stable.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Tom Scottson, politics reporter at Politics there. Joining us now is US political journalist Laurie Laird. Laurie, of course, this is President Trump acting this morning. He's spoken to the New York Times saying that this is a lot of planning went into this, but it seems like it may have come as a bit of a surprise to many of us. What do you make of the news this morning from Caracas?
It's bizarre, isn't it? Because we've had I'm sitting here in a state of shock, yet we've had every warning that this move was going to happen. We had the buildup of military hardware off the coast of Venezuela. We had Trump saying that land invasions are going to happen. So I'm not sure why I'm so surprised. It's an interesting move. A couple of questions that I have. One is, who is going to run Venezuela? You know, there are lots of reasons to think that Venezuela will be a better place without Nicolas Maduro. He's been misruling the place since he came to office over a decade ago. But the opposition, there's very little opposition. It's been decimated by Maduro and his colleagues. So the vice president is now saying she's in charge. She is very closely aligned with Maduro's policies, which have essentially bankrupted the country. But who really is in charge? That is a question. An unstable Venezuela may not be any more advantageous to the U.S. as a neighbor than a Venezuela led by Maduro. The other question I have, and this is a little bit pointy-headed, is what is the authority that Donald Trump used to go in and remove this leader? Again, Venezuela could be a better place without him, but U.S. law doesn't tend to allow the president a great deal of latitude to go in and remove leaders that he does not like. Was Congress consulted? Now, a senator, cut me off if I'm getting too long-winded here, but a Republican senator called Mike Lee has posted within the past half an hour or so on X that he had spoken with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Rubio assured Mike Lee that the military operation was simply used to protect the military personnel who were going in to arrest Maduro. Therefore, it fell within the president's legal authority. Is that legal enough? That will be for presidential law, for congressional lawyers to hash out.
Well, Laurie Laird, we are hearing now from the Russian Foreign Ministry. They've condemned what it called an act of armed aggression against Venezuela by the United States, calling any excuses given, such as perhaps the one you've just termed from Senator Mike Lee, those actions untenable. They said that we reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people and our support for the Bolivarian leadership's course of action aimed at protecting the country's national interests and sovereignty. It's particularly interesting to hear what the Kremlin is saying, because just 12 hours ago, they filed a diplomatic request with the United States asking Washington to stop pursuing an oil tanker which was originally bound for Venezuela. As Russia continues its war in Ukraine and relies on its shadow fleet to continue its supply of oil around the world, of course, its big money maker, its relationship with Venezuela is enormously important. Donald Trump's been accused of being an ally of the Kremlin in some quarters, but what he's done today will have frustrated Vladimir Putin enormously.
Oh, without a doubt, and Russia has been a long-term champion of Venezuela, although some of those remittances that Russia was sending to Venezuela have dried up. Russia is taking excess cash and putting it elsewhere. Iran has been a supporter of Venezuela in the past as well. Again, not a whole lot of cash to prop up a country that is essentially collapsed. And you're raising a question, is oil behind this? Does the U.S. want to get its hands on those vast untapped oil reserves that Venezuela sits on, the greatest quantity of reserves in the world, greater than Saudi Arabia? Interesting question. The thing is that oil prices at the moment are historically low. They fell 20% in 2025. They fell by a similar amount in 2024. And most oil analysts, and look, sometimes these people get it wrong, but most oil analysts think that there's a mismatch between oil supply and oil demand, in that there's a lot more supply out there than there is demand. That suggests that oil prices could continue to fall in 2026. So getting U.S. hands or U.S. companies into Venezuela to tap those reserves, does that make a great deal of sense when demand for oil doesn't just seem to be all that strong at the moment? But, I think any discussion of this, you're right in bringing oil into it. It seems like it has to play a role here, because Maduro's involvement in drug trafficking is fairly scant. I mean, I think most narco analysts believe that Venezuela is used as an entrepot in transporting drugs or transporting components of drugs that eventually hit the retail level. But not a lot is being developed, grown, and manufactured, being produced in Venezuela. It's simply a stopping point when drugs are distributed.
Laurie Laird, just very quickly, we are hearing now from the Venezuelan Foreign Minister, Ivan Gil Pinto, saying that the country has requested an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council in response to the US attack. And the Foreign Minister wrote on Telegram, sharing a letter that he has sent to the UN, no cowardly attack will prevail against the strength of this people, who will emerge victorious. Does this point to the fact Venezuela now really is, in a sense, powerless and is relying on diplomatic posturing and support at a time when its president is being taken to the United States to stand trial? To now go to write letters to the UN does suggest that its options have pretty much run out.
Yeah, I don't think it had a whole lot of options in the first place, but it does place the international community in a little bit of an awkward position. The only full-throated defense of Venezuela that we've heard is from Russia, from Iran. The rest of the world may be looking at this thinking, okay, we're not very comfortable with removing a leader from power, even though Maduro was widely thought to have been a dictator who ran his country into the ground. On the other hand, do we condone America going in and removing a leader under, if the excuse is Maduro being a narco-terrorist? Again, the evidence for that is scant. So removing him under those causes will cause, I think, a great deal of discomfort in many European capitals.
OK, Laurie Laird, US political journalist, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, let's just quickly bring our panel back in. We've not got long on top of the hour, but just to say, the Belgians are saying that they're now liaising with their European partners to monitor the situation. Yet we've still not heard anything from the Prime Minister. We've still not heard anything from the Foreign Secretary. Just really quickly, how long do you think it will be? And is that quick enough? Surely we should have heard by now.
I think they'll be, choosing their words carefully, but I suspect we will hear from them in the next hour or so, because I think it's untenable to not say something when every other world leader is reacting.
Okay, Matthew and Duncan, we'll speak to you in the next hour because it's 53 minutes past 10 and there's lots more to come on Saturday Morning Live today as we get more updates from Venezuela. President Donald Trump has confirmed those large-scale strikes on the capital. He will be giving a press conference in Mar-a-Lago later in the afternoon.
Indeed, just over 5 hours' time till that press conference, but we'll be bringing you all the latest here on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's cold, it's going to remain bitterly cold for much of the weekend. Sunny spells today, plenty of winter sunshine, but snow showers in the forecast. A strong northerly wind across us at the moment. Arctic air bringing in frequent snow showers across particularly the north, but also coastal stretches. An icy start in places this morning and through into the afternoon. It remained bitterly cold. Plenty of winter sunshine, a cold northerly wind just making it feel that bit bitter out there, and temperature-wise struggling to rise much above freezing for many of us, maybe 5 or 6 degrees in the far southwest. Out on the strength of that wind, it will feel below freezing. Further snow showers as we move into the afternoon and evening time, particularly frequent across northern Scotland, 20 centimetres or so building up over the next 24 hours on top of what already has fallen. Icy stretches and some travel disruption likely. Icy stretches for much of the country. Northern Ireland seeing wintry showers this evening time. Plenty of clear skies through the spine of the country, but either side of this around coastal stretches in the east and the west, further snow showers, some sleet in places, icy stretches too as temperatures fall well below freezing. And overnight ice remains the main hazard, as well as further heavy snow showers, particularly across north and the west and down the east coast of England as well. Icy stretches here, further snow accumulations. Drifting of snow over northern Scotland in a strong northerly wind, and temperatures well below freezing, -2 to -5, perhaps as low as -10 in the glens of Scotland. It's an icy start to a Sunday morning. Met Office warnings for snow and ice across much of the country. And then through the day, we'll see the wind just subtly change direction to a northwesterly, allowing further snow showers and sleet showers across western parts of the country. Best of the sunshine in the east, but temperatures are really struggling once more.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's a brand new year and we're giving you the chance to win our biggest cash prize to date. £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours. And we've come to the Aurora Collection Resort here in Lapland to celebrate. An incredible £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes & Co. with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here. GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's 11 a.m. on Saturday, the 3rd of January, live across the United Kingdom. This is Saturday Morning Live.
Breaking news this morning, Venezuela has declared a state of national emergency after President Donald Trump confirmed that the US has carried out a large-scale strike on the capital of Caracas.
As President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured by Delta Force and flown out of the country, where they are expected to face charges in the United States. Well, Donald Trump will hold a press conference from Mar-a-Lago later this afternoon, and we'll keep you updated on developments throughout the morning.
Meanwhile, reaction has been pouring in from around the world. Russia has condemned the attack as an attack of armed aggression against Venezuela, saying they are deeply concerned. Elsewhere, Germany says it's watching the situation intensely. We'll have all the latest reaction.
This comes, of course, as Iran has opened fire on anti-regime protesters in that worsening situation, despite President Trump's warning that Washington is locked and loaded and ready to intervene.
The biggest stories, boldest opinions and liveliest debates over the next hour. I'm Sophie Reaper.
And I'm Charlie Peters. Your weekend starts here. So major breaking news this morning in Venezuela. President Maduro taken out of the capital in a dramatic raid by the US Delta Force from the US Army. Special operations there. We saw low-flying Chinooks over the capital after hours of airstrikes. And now
set to face criminal charges as well, isn't he? Now we're hearing from the US this morning. Going to be bringing you all the latest developments on that ahead of the press conference in Mar-a-Lago later today. And of course, we will, when we get it, we will bring you the reaction from the UK government.
Yes, and plenty of other British political leaders getting involved. As you might expect, the far-left politicians were the first to denounce this intervention. We've heard from Jeremy Corbyn, we've heard from Zara Sultana referring to the imperialism of these actions. But I think we could expect some support for the actions for Donald Trump later today, deposing and removing a man who has, of course, lost elections but clung on illegally to his rule in South America. But what do you think? We'd love to know from you. Of course, you know the drill by now. gbnews.com/your say. How does this matter for you at home in Britain? Could it affect your energy prices?
Indeed. But before we do anything else, here's Sophia Wenslow with all your latest headlines.
Charlie, Sophie, thank you. And good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. These are your headlines. Now, as you've been hearing, Donald Trump has confirmed US strikes on Venezuela and claimed President Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country. Republican Senator Mike Lee has said the Venezuelan president was arrested to stand trial in the US on criminal charges. Maduro declared a state of emergency after explosions and low-flying aircrafts were heard in the capital of Caracas this morning. The Venezuelan government said it rejects and denounces the US military's aggression. The Trump administration has accused President Maduro of heading a drug cartel and says it's cracking down on trafficking. Defense editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, says it's possibly the biggest development in the second Trump administration.
There has been continuous pressure now for months, for 2 or 3 months, from America, mainly on the excuse or justification that Venezuela is a drug hub, a major source of drugs. It isn't quite as big as made out, but the main contention seems to be about oil, about Venezuelan oil, which Trump has accused has been illegitimately obtained, again, from other people, including American interests.
Meanwhile, Iranian security forces opened fire on protesters last night, despite Donald Trump's threat to intervene in the rapidly spreading unrest. So far, at least 10 people have been killed and dozens arrested after a severe economic crisis sparked violent protests across the country. The US president had warned Iran earlier in the day that Washington was locked and loaded and would rescue demonstrators if Tehran killed any more anti-regime protesters. But Iran's foreign ministry condemned what they called intimidating remarks and threatened a swift, decisive and comprehensive response if the US intervenes. Elsewhere, sparklers on champagne bottles are the likely cause of a deadly fire at a Swiss ski resort, according to officials. The blaze on New Year's Eve injured 119 people and killed 40. Meanwhile, the first 4 victims of the fire have been identified as 2 Swiss women aged 21 and 16 and 2 Swiss men aged 18 and 16. Their bodies have been returned to their families, according to Swiss police. Pictures of teenagers still unaccounted for have begun to emerge, with a student who studied in England declared missing. 15-year-old Charlotte Needham, who holds French and Israeli citizenship, briefly attended the JFS school in London and Emmanuel College in Hertfordshire. Now, 2 people have died and a third is missing after trying to help a teenage girl who was washed away in the sea off the East Yorkshire coast. That's according to reports. Police were called to Withensea at 3:15 p.m. yesterday, where a 67-year-old man was pulled unconscious from the water and died at the scene, while a second person's body was recovered that evening. Searches continue today for a third person. And Elon Musk's social media platform X is facing backlash after its AI chatbot has introduced a new feature allowing people to effectively undress women without their consent. Grok can take a picture from the social media platform X, including of real people, and digitally alter them to remove their clothes. That's despite the platform's acceptable use policy prohibiting such activity. In a statement on X, Grok said, "We've identified lapses in safeguards and are urgently fixing them. Child sexual abuse material is illegal and prohibited." Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Charlie and Sophie.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Charlie Peters and me, Sophie Reaper.
Now, in some breaking news this morning, President Trump has confirmed the US has carried out large-scale strikes on Venezuela. He posted on Truth Social, his own social media site, saying that President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country.
Venezuelan ally Iran has commented this morning, saying that the attack is a, quote, blatant violation of its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Well, the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said this morning that the American actions in Venezuela overnight are unorthodox and contrary to international law. But if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. He goes on to say, "I hope the Venezuelan people can now take a new leaf without Maduro." We're joined now by US foreign policy expert Jack Clayton. Good morning to you, Jack. Thank you very much for joining us here on Saturday Morning Live. Now, the US administration has sort of wrapped up its intervention here in charges and allegations of narco-terrorism, saying that Maduro is closely linked to drug flows, those boats going towards the United States, and that's why he has had those charges under the first Trump administration since 2020. Is that why you think the US has intervened this morning?
Well, like you say, that is, of course, the rationale that the Trump administration has given. And there's been hostilities or sort of exchange of war words almost since, like you say, the first term. And building up to this, we have seen strikes on boats and under the claim that this is about combating narco-terrorism. However, of course, there are those who are more skeptical about the true intentions behind what has happened, which is, I have to say, a really extraordinary development, as we've been learning here this morning, where Maduro has now been captured and on the way to the United States to face trial in New York. But of course, what critics are saying is that this is really about oil reserves. And of course, Venezuela does have the largest resources in the world. And not only that, it exports a lot of that to China and Russia as well. So that is potentially a close ally of Vladimir Putin and President Xi that is now deposed, depending, of course, what actually now happens to the regime. Of course, Maduro's government officials are currently, as things stand, still in position, in post.
Jack, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, these strikes, of course, took place in the early hours of this morning. And ever since, we've been getting information in dribs and drabs about the involvement, perhaps, of Delta Force and the fact, as you rightly say, that Maduro has been captured and is now on his way to the US to face trial. We're also expecting a press conference from Mar-a-Lago at 11 a.m. US time, 4 p.m. in the UK, so in just under 5 hours' time. What more do you think we'll hear from the Trump administration today? Do you think we'll get perhaps some kind of explanation given, an actual explanation, I should say, into why exactly these have happened and what the charges that Maduro is facing will be?
Well, of course, this is slightly speculative, and we will find out, like you say,
of course,
later on. But there are similarities, you could say, to what happened in Panama in the early 90s. I'm sorry, actually, could you repeat the last part of that question? It's just on my side, I couldn't quite get that.
Of course, Jack, of course. I was just asking, obviously, we've got this press conference at Mar-a-Lago, and you rightly say, of course, that would be speculation to suggest that we know anything thus far about what the Trump administration might tell us. But just if you could just speculate for us, perhaps, about what you anticipate we may learn later on today.
Sure, sorry, thank you. So what we might learn as an explanation is that actually this is beginning to be, perhaps in the Trump administration's own eyes, quite consistent with what they were saying their worldview is, that they began to articulate, you could say, in their national security strategy document that was released last month in December, where they said they were going to focus particularly on the Western Hemisphere and direct security concerns, you could say, to the United States and relatively near or neighboring countries, and specifically with Venezuela. As you mentioned, it's accused Maduro of helping and aiding narco-terrorism, almost effectively being state sponsors. And also Donald Trump has accused Maduro of releasing, as he calls them, or kind of paraphrasing here, their worst criminals to kind of come over the border. So we're also seeing very explicitly from the Trump administration, perhaps more so than previous administrations before, that actually immigration is now a national security threat to the United States as he sees it, and that Venezuela and the regime of Maduro is a big threat to that issue.
And Jack, we are getting further reaction from inside Venezuela now. The government there was relatively silent for the first few hours of this intervention, but the Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, who is one of Maduro's top enforcers, a close ally, of course, has made a televised address to the people, urging calm, urging them to trust the leadership, saying, let no one fall into despair, let no one make things easier for the invading enemy. He's also claimed that the US only partially achieved what it set out to do by attacking Venezuela. I think that's probably not true. I mean, the end state of this mission was clearly getting Maduro out and taking him to, we presume, the United States. So I think the sort of main objective has been achieved. But he also said, without providing evidence, that bombs had struck civilian buildings. And we can't comment on that at this stage because we haven't seen any evidence of it. But one thing we have seen being struck, it appears, is the mausoleum of Hugo Chavez. Now, that is an extraordinary strike. To go beyond targeting military and logistical sites, to go into something of national heritage. It's not quite a religious site, or it's obviously not like targeting a hospital or other protected zones, but it does point to a wider military agenda beyond what is necessary for shaping the ground for the movements of, say, Delta Force to recover Maduro.
Yes, I mean, I think you could say that in itself is a political statement. I mean, I would actually question a bit, as part of your question, that actually the overall objective has now been completed by just capturing Maduro himself. I mean, what we are now perhaps waiting to find out is if there is going to be a full-scale regime change, and actually whether Maduro's allies are swiftly ousted as well. And this is really dependent on what Donald Trump wants to invest in his time to shaping Venezuelan politics. But if he believes, as he has been saying, that Maduro is directly responsible for aiding narco-terrorists, then it's quite hard to believe then that he would think it would be acceptable that his acolytes would be able to stay in power, as well as they would have the same networks to continue these types of operations.
US foreign policy expert Jack Clayton, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And just to bring our viewers some breaking news as we speak about targets that have and have not been hit in no strikes overnight. The Venezuelan state oil company PDVSA has told employees production and refining operations are normal and that the US attacks left oil facilities unscathed. That is according to a PDVSA assessment. However, we also know that Venezuela's La Guaira port, I think we've seen footage of that this morning, we've now had confirmed via the Reuters news agency, that has been severely damaged in the strikes overnight.
We're also hearing from the European Union. Its top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, who of course was the former Estonian Prime Minister. She said that Maduro lacks legitimacy. Posting on X, she said that she has spoken with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and our ambassador in Caracas. The EU is closely monitoring the situation in Venezuela. She added that the EU has repeatedly stated that Mr. Maduro lacks legitimacy and has defended a peaceful transition. Under all circumstances, the principles of international law and the UN Charter must be respected. We call for restraint, and that is the statement put out from Kaja Kallas. Right, it's 16 minutes past 11, and let's bring in now the former Conservative MP and British Army officer James Sutherland, who can join us now for some more reaction this morning. In reaction, of course, to what those world leaders have been saying, James, what do you expect the United Kingdom to say?
Interesting question. We're very focused on Venezuela right now, on what's happened this morning. Clearly, US intervention, special forces, 7 Chinooks have gone in to Venezuela to kidnap the president. But we're not talking about the UK response. What would that response be? I don't know. I don't suspect that the UK has got much interest in that part of the world. I don't suspect that Keir Starmer will say anything publicly to go against what Trump has done. Clearly, the US has reasons for doing what it's done. It's the legitimacy of the government. It's Maduro's legitimacy. It's drugs. It's oil. It's 8 million refugees having left Venezuela. There's clearly reasons for doing what's happened. But I suspect that the British government will stay pretty quiet.
Now, of course, James, we're expecting to hear more from the USA later this afternoon from Mar-a-Lago, that press conference that the Trump administration has said will be taking place at 11 o'clock in the morning, 4 p.m. here in the UK. We've also heard from them this morning that President Maduro has been captured and that he will now stand criminal trial. What do you make of that information? Do you think that President Trump was well within his rights to be carrying out that that kind of action, or is that something that will spring legal questions going forward?
I'm not sure that legality is going to be robust enough to back up what's happened this morning, but clearly the US has made the decision. It's gone in. It's effectively invaded a sovereign state. 7 Chinook aircraft, special forces, they've landed. They've secured the site. Strike Force has gone in, probably from Delta or the SEALs, and they've removed Maduro and his wife. So there'll be lots of questions, I think, to be asked about that. But strategically, this is very significant. This is all about the use of military force for political ends. It's probably designed for regime change, perhaps through intimidation, perhaps to try and force the regime change now that's needed in Venezuela. But it also shows the Americans are very happy to use force. Look at Iran, look at Nigeria, look at Venezuela this morning, look at Syria. And I think that the case for the liberalist agenda, that intervention agenda that Trump now appears to be a big fan of, is strengthening all the time. And I think it has impact strategically around the world, because if the Americans have done it so far, no doubt at all, it's in their mind and they'll do it again.
It's a curious reaction from Nigel Farage this morning, James Sunderland, because he almost sounds a little bit like his opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, saying that the American actions in Venezuela overnight are unorthodox and contrary to international law. He then says, of course, but if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. But his immediate reaction this morning, Nigel Farage, famously anti-intervention, doesn't want more conflict overseas, doesn't think that the British military should be acting more boldly in countries, such as in the Middle East, of course. But he seems to be criticising actions of the US president there and talking about international law, a theme, an issue which a lot of supporters of Donald Trump will say isn't really relevant here. They just want to get a job done.
Yeah, it's interesting you've carried that comment by Farage. There's been no comment, as far as I can tell, from Downing Street, nothing from the Conservatives yet, so why Farage? But Farage may be right. I suspect that the actions this morning were contrary to international law. Whatever definition of that the US have used, who knows? But quite clearly there has been an invasion. It's reminiscent of the attack on Osama bin Laden. It's interesting, isn't it, the fact that the tactic's been used before, Chinook aircraft, probably taken off from a seaborne platform, perhaps even a carrier, going in, conducting an operation and flying out. In and out very quickly.
James, what I find really interesting is that 2 days ago, President Maduro gave an interview in which he said that they were ready for dialogue with the US. That was just 2 days ago, 48 hours ago. What could have shifted, speaking from a military perspective, speaking from a geopolitical perspective, what could have shifted to make President Trump carry these strikes out? Of course, he said this morning that a lot of planning has gone into it. But if President Maduro has said that they were ready for dialogue, what could have been the sparking point behind that to make President Trump act in this way?
Well, it's interesting because dialogue is clearly happening on multiple levels. So at the most overt level, you've got to carry a group off the coast of Venezuela, huge military force, huge intimidation, and clearly threatening military force. And that's happened this morning. But it's interesting, isn't it, the fact that that the CIA are almost certainly talking as well. There's probably influence being brought to bear on the current government. There's dialogue, no doubt, happening with military officers in Venezuela. So I think a lot is happening under the surface that we don't know about, and that's quite normal in these situations. Was a deal done? Did the Venezuelans know that the Americans were coming? I doubt it very much, because that would have presented a very soft target in terms of the slow-moving Chinooks. But my point is that a lot is happening right across that political spectrum. I suspect that a deal is being done with the government, and I suspect that it won't be too long before we have free and fair elections in Venezuela, with perhaps the opposition parties taking control, assuming, of course, that the military forces will agree to that.
James Sunderland, you spent the best part of 3 decades in the Royal Logistics Corps, and looking at this operation from the US government, you say that the Venezuelans are unlikely to have much awareness of it before it arrives, but of course there would have been a significant logistical build-up to launch those Night Stalkers, to get Delta Force inside Venezuela, to have close to 5,000 US Marines just around the corner. That will bring into questions as well what support did they get from their allies? And in particular, of interest to us, of course, is what could the British government have done to support them? Because there have been questions about to what extent our military support in the Caribbean has waned as a consequence of those airstrikes and drone strikes on the so-called narco boats that the US Department of Defence have been targeting. Do you think there would have been much British military awareness ahead of this strike?
My instinct is no, not at all. I suspect the Americans didn't even tell the British or any of the allies they were going in. Why would they do that? Because that may have resulted in a breach of security. The Americans are a powerful nation. There's a carrier group just off the coast of Venezuela. They can do entirely what they want when they want to do it, as was proven in the case of the bombings of Iran and Syria and Nigeria. The Americans don't need permission from anyone, not even the British, to go and do this. So they've done it. They've done it for purely political reasons, in my view. Regime change is top of the list. And no doubt Donald Trump will come on the airwaves at some point this morning to justify the action, to report on where Maduro is, and then to talk about what happens next in Venezuela. But it's very interesting. I suspect that the action was very tightly planned over a period of time. These things are not easy to plan. Special forces and their movements are closely guarded secrets. 7 Chinooks, carrier group. It's a detailed operation where they would have been very prepared for it. And no, it would have been autonomous. It would have been of their own volition. And they've done it and they've come home.
Yes, James Sunderland, former Tory MP and British Army officer, thank you very much for your time. Politics is about power, and there's certainly a lot of power in the carrier strike group of the USS Gerald Ford off the coast there.
Indeed. Well, joining us now in the studio for further reaction to this, former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and broadcaster Duncan Barks. Thank you for joining us again, gentlemen. Matthew, just to bring this up again, so I feel like a broken record this morning, but we just had a list from the Reuters news agency of all the people who have given comment this morning, and just to read you some: the Russian Foreign Ministry, Iran's Supreme Leader, the Spanish Foreign Ministry, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, an MP from Germany's Conservative Union. The list goes on. And yet, we've heard from Nigel Farage already this morning, and yet nothing yet from the Labour government. I think for many people in the United Kingdom this morning, and particularly any British nationals in Venezuela, they will be looking to the government for a response, for some kind of indication of what will be happening next. Is it good enough that we still, I know that their administration, Starmer's administration, will be wanting to tread lightly, as you mentioned in the last hour, but is it good enough that we haven't heard yet?
No, I mean, I think it's unsustainable for us not here for much longer. I mean, my understanding is that the Prime Minister is due to do a pre-recorded interview to be broadcast tomorrow quite shortly. I think we may be seeing that clips released from that where the issue is addressed. So I think that we may be hearing from Keir Starmer quite shortly, because we do need to hear from the government. And actually, oddly, Nigel Farage's statement makes it easier for the government, because you can basically take the same line. There's clearly not going to be a big divide. Interestingly, I think Farage wants to be part of that kind of mainstream. I suspect we'll be hearing similar language from the Tories, from the Lib Dems.
I don't think so. I don't think we'll hear similar language. I think Kemi Badenoch will see that curious tweet from Nigel Farage and think, what a wonderful opportunity.
Oh, I'm going back and back Trump more heartedly.
I think it's remarkable to hear this balance from Nigel Farage. One point saying this is contrary to international law, but it might be a good thing. What a bizarre position for him to be in, Duncan Barks.
Well, you could argue it's a statement from a future Prime Minister, can't you?
That's
that actually what it is a statement that you would make if you were a leader of this country. And I think, if you look at some of the research and polling that's out there, people in this country are not massive fans of Donald Trump on the whole. So consequently, and Nigel knows this because he will have seen it. And if you look back over certainly the last year and a half, he's rode back a little bit in terms of his support for Donald Trump. So when the statement broke earlier, I read it with great interest. I thought that's a very assured, a very balanced statement. Totally. So I'm not.
Does the balance work? It's against international law, but it might be a good thing. He said too much in a way, potentially. If you look at this critically, to say that he has broken international law, but it's good. I mean, the first question when Nigel Farage next appears is, what other situations do you agree with when world leaders break international law, Mr. Farage?
It does speak volumes. I mean, maybe he already knows that there was no congressional authority here in terms of Trump's actions or whatever, and he's putting down a marker. I mean, I think it is a very middle of the road statement, and I'm surprised by it, but equally I can see the logic behind it, which is this is what you would actually put out if you're a Prime Minister. Talking of Prime Ministers, it's almost 11:30. 11 at the moment. There's nothing out of Downing Street, regardless of a pre-recorded interview being done at the moment. So there are clips for GB News and elsewhere. I mean, if we don't have anything by midday, that really is shocking in my view. People in this country want to know what our Prime Minister thinks about this. Venezuelans in this country want to know what our Prime Minister thinks about this. And I mean, you know, there's nothing by midday. It's a pretty poor show.
I mean, I think what's interesting about the Farage thing is that is he trying to paint Keir Starmer into a corner? Because if you've got a clear statement that Trump's broken international law from Trump fanboy Farage, then doesn't that make it put pressure on the Prime Minister to say that? Because he will be getting pressure from the left, as we discussed earlier, to say that the international law has been broken.
You say he sounds like a potential Prime Minister. I completely understand the take. But he also sounds a bit like Keir Starmer. Sounds like the Uni Party. Sounds like a statement we'd get from other politicians.
That's my point, yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if Badenoch decides that she wants to be closer to Trump, because, as Duncan was saying, Trump is so unpopular in this country. And it's not just the Venezuelan people who'll be thinking, we don't like Maduro, but we don't like somebody coming in and snatching our president. I think the British people may be thinking the same thing as well.
But I doubt they'll be making, as in Kemi Badenoch, that is, another sort of right-wing politicians, I doubt they'll be making the international law.
No, and Starmer won't say as explicitly as that. Starmer will have to say, we'll have to do similar to other Europeans, saying we're watching the situation closely, developing situation. We hope that we condemn the situation in terms of the regime in Venezuela. We want to see change, but, you know...
And that's why it's so alarming, though, isn't it, that we haven't heard anything from Mr Keir Starmer yet, because you just gave the statement that we essentially
I'll send it to him.
We've seen it from Belgium, we've seen it from Italy, Spain, Germany. We know what that statement's going to consist of. So why is it taking so long? There's no excuse.
I don't know, and they need to get it out. I mean, as Duncan says, by noon, I think we have to hear something.
It feeds into this narrative that does exist in this country for the last 18 months of a Labour government and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, that he's just a bit flip-floppy. So what do I say about this? What's the right thing to say about this? And it does feed into the narrative that there's no real leadership. I was joking with Matt out the back when we were having a cup of coffee earlier. It's just like, where's the statement? He's probably having a quick focus group to try and organise what's the right thing to say to make sure that people go, yeah, I think that'll work. You know, there should be something by now.
There is quite a lot of agreement for you on gbnews.com/your say. Farage playing both sides to stay safe. Betty says it was the right statement from Farage. He stated the law and reflected on how many Venezuelans would be in support of the action. So, you know, perhaps it's domestic posturing.
Well, I mean, look, I think the issue, one of the issues for Starmer is Starmer has effectively decided that he would incur the wrath of left liberal opinion by being seen to be close to Trump over the last 18 months of the government. Why? Because he wants to deliver trade deals, but also wants to deliver for Ukraine. And I think he will be thinking very carefully in Downing Street, what can we say that doesn't put the president off even his limited support for efforts in Ukraine?
OK, Matthew and Duncan, thank you very much for your time this hour. Lots more to come on the show today. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Charlie Safi, thank you. Your headlines at 11:31. Donald Trump has confirmed strikes on Venezuela and claimed President Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country. Sparklers on champagne bottles are the likely cause of a deadly fire at a Swiss ski resort, according to officials. The blaze on New Year's Eve injured 119 people and killed 40. Iranian security forces opened fire on protesters last night, despite Donald Trump's threat to intervene in the rapidly spreading unrest. So far, at least 10 people have been killed and dozens arrested after severe economic crisis sparked violent protests across the country. Britain looks set to shiver through the first week of the new year, with snow covering parts of the country and yellow snow and ice warnings in place until Monday. And it's Sunshine Saturday, the busiest day of the year for holiday bookings abroad, with package holiday bookings expected to rise. Those are your headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB Digital Radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's cold, it's going to remain bitterly cold for much of the weekend. Sunny spells today, plenty of winter sunshine, but snow showers in the forecast. A strong northerly wind across us at the moment. Arctic air bringing in frequent snow showers across particularly the north, but also coastal stretches. An icy start in places this morning and through into the afternoon. It remained bitterly cold. Plenty of winter sunshine, a cold northerly wind just making it feel that bit bitter out there, and temperature-wise struggling to rise much above freezing for many of us, maybe 5 or 6 degrees in the far southwest. Add on the strength of that wind, it will feel below freezing. Further snow showers as we move into the afternoon and evening time, particularly frequent across northern Scotland, 20 centimetres or so building up over the next 24 hours on top of what already has fallen. Icy stretches and some travel disruption likely. Icy stretches for much of the country. Northern Ireland seeing wintry showers this evening time. Plenty of clear skies through the spine of the country, but either side of this, around coastal stretches in the east and the west, further snow showers, some sleet in places, icy stretches too, as temperatures fall well below freezing. And overnight, ice remains the main hazard, as well as further heavy snow showers, particularly across north and the west and down the east coast of England as well. Icy stretches here, further snow accumulations. Drifting of snow over northern Scotland in a strong northerly wind, and temperatures well below freezing, -2 to -5, perhaps as low as -10 in the glens of Scotland. It's an icy start to a Sunday morning. Met Office warnings for snow and ice across much of the country. And then through the day, we'll see the wind just subtly change direction to a northwesterly, allowing further snow showers and sleet showers across western parts of the country. Best of the sunshine in the east, but temperatures are really struggling once more.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. The time is 11:35 and breaking news this morning as President Trump confirms the US has carried out large-scale strikes on Venezuela.
Well, President Trump has posted on his Truth social media platform in the last half hour saying that President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have been captured and flown out of the country. The Venezuelan ally, Iran, has commented this morning saying that the attack is a blatant violation of its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Well, the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has said the American actions in Venezuela overnight are unorthodox and contrary to international law, but if they make China and Russia think twice, it may be a good thing. He goes on to say, I hope the Venezuelan people can now turn a new leaf without Maduro.
Very interesting, that, isn't it? Because it seems quite a measured response from Mr Farage there, but I think, as you rightly say, it's a bit contradictive, the two things that he said, because he's mentioned international law, but then he said, but perhaps it's a good thing. It seems quite a contradictory statement, but...
International law means that we should lose the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Why is Nigel Farage defending international law? It's a curious position.
I will say, though, at least Nigel Farage has made a comment. Yeah. We're yet to hear from either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party this morning, and as we were just speaking about with our panel, I think it's shocking that we haven't heard anything yet.
Let's bring in now the Security and Intelligence Professor Anthony Glees. Mr Glees, thank you very much, Professor Glees, rather, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Now, what is your take on the actions undertaken by the US government this morning? The Venezuelan government and its ministers putting out messages of defiance today, but it appears they've lost this round.
Well, it's certainly a very surprising start to 2026. And I think it could be hazardous for President Trump. On the face of it, it looks good. Let's be honest. He's got rid of President Maduro, you know, alleged to be head of a narco-terrorist state. Trump's been turning up the pressure on him for months now, and a lot of armed force in the area. This massive aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, in the area. Over 2,000 Marines, 16,000 troops. And what he's done has been a dramatic strike, removing the president and his wife from Venezuela, taking them, you know, who knows where. Maybe they'll end up in Cuba at the end of the day, or possibly even in Moscow, guests with President Assad of Syria and others. Who knows? However, Venezuela does have troops. It does have 1,000 proper regular soldiers and over 200,000, so we're told, 100,000 troops and 200,000 paramilitaries. Are they going to accept this strike? Certainly, at the end of the day, America is stronger, but they may put up a fight. Now, when we look at this in the round, I know my old friend Nigel Farage says, yes, this is a warning shot to China and a warning shot to Putin. Excuse me, I don't think so. I think it is saying that Trump regards himself as being in the same kind of league as Putin and Xi, that if there is a state nearby that they think they need to control, then they will try and control it. And that's what Trump is doing in Venezuela. So I don't think it's a move against that sort of power politics. I think it's a move that demonstrates Trump's adherence to this new way of trying to solve problems. And there are two things, I think, that President Trump has done to stop immigration almost completely into unlawful immigration into the United States of America, and to take on he calls them narco-terrorists, we might call them the Breaking Bad drug cartels. They were rotting America's mind with narcotics, and Trump is doing something about it. And I think a lot of people will say that's no bad thing. On the other hand, he is disrupting the international order. And even domestically, it could cause problems for Trump because America has not declared war on Venezuela. And although Trump says they're at war with the narco-terrorists, there is no declaration of war against Venezuela. And the US Congress will either have to say, look, we can't put up with this is unlawful, or if they say we're fine with it, they're kind of writing their own death warrant, and we're moving into King Trump of America.
Anthony, something
territory.
I'd love to get your take on this morning is one of the key words that have been mentioned since these strikes is oil. Lots of people speculating that perhaps that was a key motive for the Trump administration. However, we've been hearing in the last hour or so that the Venezuelan state's oil company, PDVSA, has said that their oil production and refining operations are going on as normal, and that their facilities have been left unscathed by the strikes that took place overnight. Do you think perhaps that this is something that will come in the coming days and weeks? Do you think that this is perhaps ultimately the Trump administration's plan, or was last night all about getting to President Maduro and getting him out of Venezuela and into the US?
Well, I think what we know about President Donald J. Trump is that he's a charming man. He fundamentally believes in peace. I know this looks odd, but he acts on a whim, and he can lose his temper very severely. And Maduro has got the wrong side of him. And Trump has been saying for months, look, Maduro, I'm not messing about. Either you leave office. At one stage, the Americans were prepared to offer Maduro millions of dollars to leave office. Trump is saying, look, get out of there. If you don't get out of there, I'm going to come in and get you. And now he has come in and got him in a very dramatic way. The world is shaken. I'm not surprised that Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch haven't issued a statement yet because it's very hard for them to know what to say.
Okay.
They condemn Trump, they're in trouble. They don't condemn Trump, they're also in trouble. But I don't think primarily this has to do with Venezuelan oil. I think it has to do with the fact that Maduro was foolish enough, in Trump's eyes, not to chicken out of the game of chicken that the two men have been playing. I don't think this is a sign of American strength in one sense. I think it's a sign of the weakness that America has when it has given its president this unbridled power. Will the world be sorry if Maduro goes? No, absolutely not. Will the world be sorry if the narco trade is stopped? Absolutely no. But this is not necessarily the end of the story. And we don't want 2026 to begin with a general boiling over of fighting in Venezuela, you know, the Caribbean. We have
Professor
a lot of
Anthony
interest
Glees,
in that area.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's 43 minutes past 11. We have some more breaking news for you in terms of domestic reactions. We have now heard from the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. He said that Keir Starmer should condemn Trump's illegal action in Venezuela. Maduro is a brutal and illegitimate dictator, but unlawful attacks like this make us all less safe. Sir Ed Davey goes on to say Trump is giving a green light to the likes of Putin and Xi to attack other countries with impunity. And we've also heard from the Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, echoing those words to some extent, saying that the PM and Foreign Secretary should be condemning this illegal strike and breach of international human rights law. After years of arming a genocide and worshipping the special relationship, that's Zach Polanski referring to the war in Gaza, which of course the genocide claim is disputed by many. He says Trump now believes he can act with impunity. Well, we're joined now by former Labour advisor Kevin Marr. Kevin, very good morning to you. Your reaction there to those lines from Sir Ed Davey and Zach Polanski?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, it's a dramatic morning, and I think a lot of people are still trying to process exactly what's happened and what it might mean. I mean, this has been gathering for some time. There's been obviously an armada of US warships that have been that have been positioned in Venezuela for months. The biggest I was reading, the biggest deployment since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. So I think we've been expecting something was going to happen. I think a lot of people are still processing the fact that this is much more dramatic than I think they would have felt events might have panned out. We've seen the Maduros taken by US special forces and taken back presumably to the United States, where they may presumably stand trial or whatever. But I mean, you know, there's a lot of what ifs, I think, with this. This is yes, a big, bold, dramatic intervention. Yes, there are issues there with the Venezuelan government under Maduro. Yes, there are issues there with drugs being
I think we've just lost Kevin there for a moment. Kevin, let us know when you can rejoin us. We have been hearing, Sophie, from the Russian ministry and a number of extensive comments they've made this morning, saying now that such actions, if they actually took place, this is from the Kremlin, constitute an unacceptable violation of the sovereignty of an independent state.
Yes, and we've also heard this morning from Cuba now saying that a zone of peace is being brutally assaulted. They've denounced what they call state terrorism against the Venezuelan people. That comes from Cuba's presidency this morning. They've also demanded reaction from the international community to what they're calling a criminal US attack on Venezuela. That was obviously took place overnight.
It's really interesting reading all your comments on gbnews.com/your say. A lot of you are being in strong agreement with this intervention this morning. A lot of critical interventions from you on your say, talking about Nigel Farage's statement reaction this morning, the first political leader in the country to react to these actions by the US government, talking about international law, saying that he's broken it, but it could be a good thing. A lot of you on your say saying that that is a curious intervention for the Reform UK leader to make. Matthew Larser was telling us that Donald Trump's very unpopular in the UK. but a lot of you today in firm agreement with his actions.
Well, I believe we can bring back Kevin Marr now, former Labour advisor. Kevin, we're hearing these responses from UK political party leaders. We've heard from Zach Polanski, we've heard from Sir Davey, we've heard from Nigel Farage, and yet the two leaders we haven't heard from yet are Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. How does that look for the Labour and the Conservative parties that they're yet to make any kind of comment, even just a small statement addressing what took place overnight?
I think there'll be an awful lot of groaning coming from their offices about how they respond, because, you know, quite frankly, it's a zero-sum equation, isn't it? You either say this is guardedly a good thing or guardedly a bad thing, and there are consequences whichever way you jump on that. Now, clearly, this is, you know, the Trump action is ultra vires. It will breach international law and all the rest of it. Now, you know, there is no way Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch want to get on the wrong side of Donald Trump, but at the same token, they don't want to look intellectually, morally threadbare in terms of looking as though they're sanctioning an attack on another sovereign country. It's incredibly difficult, and I suspect Keir Starmer's team and Kemi Badenoch's team are probably on draft 25 of a short statement that they'll issue in the next hour or so. It's much easier, of course, for the smaller parties to be able to be either a bit gung-ho or against Trump or for him. But for the main parties of government, they've got to weigh up the big consequences of you know, their international obligations as well, and be very mindful of that. So it will be very cautious. And as I say, you know, they'll issue something probably through gritted teeth, and still try and process exactly what this means and exactly what happens next. Because I think that's the interesting question: is what happens on the streets of Venezuela. How do the Venezuelan people respond to this? Does any government that replaces Maduro, does that have popular consent from the public? Are we going to have to see fresh elections? Will people be seen as proxies of the United States? What happens if they do? And as of course, yes, Venezuela's got the largest oil reserves in the world. So this is a very combustible situation, both for Venezuela and potentially for the wider region, and also for America and its relations with its geographical backyard, which have always been very difficult throughout the 20th century and don't show any sign of being any less difficult going forwards.
Now, Kevin, I just want to bring you back to what you said there about the Tories and the Labour parties, because, of course, you say they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. But we've seen statements from the Italians, from the Spanish, from the Germans, from the Belgians, all this morning, who've basically said that they're following the situation closely. There are more updates to come. Why could neither Kemi Badenoch nor Sir Keir Starmer simply put a statement out like that, just to say, you know, we want the best for our citizens, anyone out in Venezuela, you know, further information to come? Why could they not have simply acknowledged it and perhaps put a statement out later in which they gave, you know, maybe perhaps more of a political stance on it? Why could they not have just put something out simply this morning to say, we're aware, this is happening, more to come?
They should have done, is the short answer. I think in these kinds of situations, sometimes the best thing to do is just to put out an initial reaction statement and say, for example, there's diplomatic and consular support for any British nationals that might be in Venezuela, and aid stands ready and all the rest of it. You don't need to get into the political ramifications of it. Sometimes it's, you know, get in there early and it stops you then having to give a running commentary when more details emerge. I mean, they're not in a good position because they've now, I think, got to kind of jump one way or the other. You've either got to say that you know, that this action is in some way justified and that Trump is essentially correct, or you end up having to go the other way and try and uphold international law and sound a little bit tetchy and get on the wrong side of Trump. So it becomes, the longer they leave it, and this applies, I would imagine, fairly equally to Kemi Badenoch as well as Keir Starmer. The longer you leave it, the harder it is to get that balance right. And it would have been smarter to issue a statement at 7 o'clock this morning, simply saying that, you know, we're monitoring events very closely closely. We've got open access to the American government and what it's planning next, and we stand ready to help with any humanitarian issues and any consular issues for British nationals.
Former Labour advisor Kevin Marr, thank you very much for your time this morning. There is more action from Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. He has shared an old post in which he condemned Nicolas Maduro. He said that Maduro is not the president of Venezuela and his regime is not the legitimate government. That's a post that Marco Rubio made on X in July. That's the only statement he's made today, just reposting that. And we've also heard him being quoted via the Senator Mike Lee, referring to the legal justification that the United States has taken in this action today.
Indeed. More to come on this, of course, on GB News throughout the day. That press conference from Mar-a-Lago in just over 4 hours' time. But thank you for joining us here on Saturday morning live today.
Don't go anywhere, as Dawn Neeson is up next with The Weekend as we await that press conference from Mar-a-Lago. Stay tuned.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It's cold, it's going to remain bitterly cold for much of the weekend. Sunny spells today, plenty of winter sunshine, but snow showers in the forecast. A strong northerly wind across us at the moment. Arctic air bringing in frequent snow showers across particularly the north, but also coastal stretches. An icy start in places this morning and through into the afternoon. It remained bitterly cold. Plenty of winter sunshine, a cold northerly wind just making it feel that bit bitter out there, and temperature-wise struggling to rise much above freezing for many of us, maybe 5 or 6 degrees in the far southwest. Add on the strength of that wind, it will feel below freezing. Further snow showers as we move into the afternoon and evening time, particularly frequent across northern Scotland, 20 centimetres or so building up over the next 24 hours on top of what already has fallen. Icy stretches and some travel disruption likely. Icy stretches for much of the country. Northern Ireland seeing wintry showers this evening time. Plenty of clear skies through the spine of the country, but either side of this around coastal stretches in the east and the west, further snow showers, some sleet in places, icy stretches too as temperatures fall well below freezing. And overnight ice remains the main hazard, as well as further heavy snow showers, particularly across north and the west and down the east coast of England as well. Icy stretches here, further snow accumulations. Drifting of snow over northern Scotland in a strong northerly wind, and temperatures well below freezing, -2 to -5, perhaps as low as -10 in the glens of Scotland. It's an icy start to a Sunday morning. Met Office warnings for snow and ice across much of the country. And then through the day, we'll see the wind just subtly change direction to a northwesterly, allowing further snow showers and sleet showers across western parts of the country. Best of the sunshine in the east, but temperatures are really struggling once more.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello from the Aurora Collection Resort here in Lapland. We're on an amazing Arctic adventure to celebrate our greatest cash giveaway, a simply stunning £85,000. And in 2026, we're giving you the chance to win it all.
For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 9th of February 2026. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms.